I'm sure will be popular, and I'm sure a lot of questions. Theatrical Distribution with our moderator, Adam. Adam, take it away.
Hey everyone. My name is Adam Sorensen. I have a long-time background in distribution. My original roots are theatrical distribution. I've been at Lionsgate for the last 15 years. Although I started in theatrical distribution, I currently oversee our multi-platform distribution, which encompasses theatrical as well as digital distribution and some stuff on the home entertainment side. Just by way of introduction of our panelists, and you folks can correct me if any of my research is inaccurate, please do correct me. Directly to my left, we have Rufus Parker, founder of P2 Films. To Rufus's left, we have Kalani Dramanis, Vice President of International Sales at Blue Fox Entertainment. And last but not least, a colleague of mine, someone who I worked with previously at Lionsgate, who is currently the CEO of his own company, Paper Airplane Media. We have Mike Polidorus.
Thank you.
I'm excited for this panel because I think it represents a true diversity of distribution experience and strategy. I'm going to open with just a general question. This is a question for each member of the panel, just to introduce yourself. If you could say a little bit about the company or organization that you work for or are running, and if you could just provide a little bit of background, specifically what your position or your role, how it intersects with distribution or what it has to do with theatrical distribution specifically.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Rufus Parker. I'm founder of P2 Films. It's a production company which I started in 2015. So far I produced 5 movies and I released 4 movies. And every movie I learn a lot in distribution. When you make a small movie, how do you make it, take it to the audience, and also how do you get financially not impacted? And slowly I stepped up. Every single movie I did a little bit higher. And the other movie, which will be released on August 30th, it's called The City of Dreams. We are releasing in 1,000 theaters. So that's the one with the no name attached. So that's the quote, because every time you go to the theaters, they are always looking for who is acting in the movie. So bringing such type of smaller movie into the larger scale, it is a lot of challenge, and you have to be very patient, and you have to wait for the right time. Thank you.
I'm Kalani Dramanis. I work at Blue Fox Entertainment. We are a theatrical distributor in the US, but also a international sales agent. So we acquire worldwide rights for films, but we also acquire US only rights for the titles that we release theatrically. I handle mostly international sales, but I also work with our US team to sell Pay One, which ties in a lot with theatrical distribution. I would say our MO is broadest audience possible. So we do aim for wide theatrical releases. We do some specialized, more niche markets, but we are, targeting the broadest audience possible in the US.
Hi, I'm Mike Polidorus. I'm the CEO of a company called Paper Airplane Media. And as Adam mentioned, I'm actually a former Lionsgate guy. I was there for 25 years. Was there from when it was live entertainment. No one cared what we did, up through everything from Saw, Tyler Perry, Hunger Games, Knives Out, La La Land, you name it. I've worked on the biggest of the big and the smallest of the small. In April of 2020, when the pandemic hit, There was restructuring. It was a great time to go out and start a cinema marketing company when every theater in the world was closed. So, don't know about that. Anyway, in the 4 years since then, we've established ourselves as truly the only real cinema marketing company, and by that meaning we work with studios, we work with Lionsgate, we do work with Blue Fox, we work with William and his team. We work with virtually every studio from big to small and everything in between to support their theatrical distribution. I've obviously known Adam since he came into the business and worked with him on numerous titles, and Adam knows what he's talking. Adam's had to work on, again, the biggest of the big and the smallest of the small. So he has a very good kind of entry level or level set on how it all works.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I think a good starting question is, and this is coming from a place of love, but we've been hearing so much doom and gloom for the last, since the onset of the pandemic 4 years ago. We've heard a lot of doom and gloom about the, theatrical is over and the death of the theatrical experience. Why are we sitting here right now? And this is kind of an open question to anybody. Why are we sitting here talking about theatrical distribution still?
I'll take that one. So if you look at the history of theatrical distribution, over 100 years, and the advent of every technology or every kind of event was going to kill theatrical. When radio came out, when television came out, when sound, like everything was going to kill it. The pandemic was going to kill it. Streaming was going to kill it. Betamax was going to kill it. And at the end of the day, what it turns out is theatrical has something very unique that no other platform has, and that is its community. It's a sense of everyone seeing the movie together. Comedies are funnier, horror movies are scarier, thrillers are more nail-biting. And if there's one thing, a silver lining that came out of the pandemic, it was the studios and the exhibitors got to try every distribution pattern anyone could think of. We're going to go day and date. We're going to go before. We're going to go 7 days, 17 days, 50 days, whatever. What they all came back to was, if the movie actually does better theatrically, it lifts the IP in all the other ancillary markets, creating more value. So to your answer, Adam, we're there because it's truly what the public wants. All you have to do is look at what's going on this weekend. But at the same time, economically, it makes a lot of sense.
When you say look at what's going on this weekend, you are, of course, referring to Borderlands.
I'm not even going to touch that one at this point. You look at the Blake Lively movie, and the movie came on what's called tracking. So you'll hear this term out there. It's called tracking. There's services that go out, a couple of months ahead of time, and they ask people, what movies do you know about? What are you going to come to see? And, everything kind of moves and ebbs and flows based on the tracking. It ends with us, when it came on tracking, looked like it was going to do maybe $15 million. Then tickets go on sale, and all of a sudden they're blowing up everywhere, and everybody goes, maybe this thing will do 25. Well, based on what they did last night, they did, I think it was $24 million they announced, plus the 7, which included the 7 from Thursday. They're on pace right now to do close to $50 million for the weekend. So it'll be a lively time in the Reynolds household. You see what I did there?
No, absolutely. I think looking at Deadpool, which is closing in on $500 million domestically, I think, if it hasn't already hit it. Obviously, looking at It Ends With Us. If you also look at Longlegs recently, in terms of it is true that if you look at the top grossing movies this year, and certainly this summer, it's going to be by and large dominated by sequels and existing IP. But Longlegs, I think, is a really interesting ray of hope that original films, with kind of challenging marketing campaigns can cut through. I think they just crossed 70 millimeter.
Yeah, they're going to go over 70 this weekend.
Yeah. Rufus, I got a quick question for you. So, during your time with P2 Films, and again, my research is iffy at best, so if anything is incorrect, please. You've worked on a variety of films, maybe most recently City of Dreams, which is coming out at the end of the month in a wide release from Roadside Attractions. But you've also worked on films that have a smaller theatrical footprint, Wild Nights with Emily, one of my personal favorites, Under the Silver Lake from A24, I think you might have been involved with. From the myriad experiences that you've had, how is it different releasing something that's a little bit more on a smaller scale or more specialized versus something like City of Dreams that's going to be a broader release?
Releasing any movie is very harder. It's irrespective of small or bigger, but it's all depends on how big you want to take the movie out. So I'll give you 3 different examples. The very first time when I started my company, I have absolutely no idea of production. I came from management consultant background. One day I woke up, I want to quit, I want to do something different. I watch movies all the time. I decided to start a production company. So then I learned in every single process. So I involved right from beginning, reading the script, pick up the script, raising the money, attach every talent, do the movie, finish the shoot, and go to the distribution and learn the distribution process. So that one small, simple movie, the learning process, I felt like I worked in a studio because I did everything by myself. Then the second example I want to give, I did $100 million crime drama Flinch. We just finished on COVID. So you can get it out theater. Even if you go to, at that time, Netflix, everybody wants to go to Netflix, everybody wants to go to Amazon, there's a lot of competition. I decided to self-release through booking the theaters. So then I try to find how the process works, how you do, who is the bookkeeper, how I can contact directly to the bookkeepers. Then after that, through Blockbuster help, I did a little bit of NFT, that NFT is coming up, so we did fair enough amount of money. Then City of Dreams has been 5 years process. We started in 2018 and we couldn't do any work on the COVID, no post-production work. Then after that, I really believed in the movie. Is the movie about child trafficking in America based on a true story, and a lot of people don't even know that's happening here. It's a $50 billion business every year coming from California mainly. And that is the fastest growing business in the world. It's $150 billion business every year in the world. I'm not talking about sex trafficking. It's only about child trafficking, labor trafficking. So we finished then. We are trying to go to the distribution. I really felt that the movie has to be shown to the audience. People should have the awareness. Then everybody, there is no name attached, it's too tense, too dark, it's blah, blah, blah. So they're not giving any deal at all. Then I got a little bit of shitty deal, but I don't want to go and take the shitty deal because my focus is not making money from out of it, because it's a social content movie. I want audience to watch. I waited and waited and waited. Then somehow we connected with the Roadside. They first initially started with the 300 theaters. Then we pushed to 500 theaters, then we pushed to 1,000 theaters. But I don't want to go to the detail of the process, but as a producer, you don't have to, I got the distribution deal, I watched it, they will take care of everything, and the movie will be released. You have to be part of every single process. You have to learn the economics of the movie making. See, making movie is hard, but releasing the movie is harder than making the movie.
That's kind of sad. It makes me sad. The whole thing is
It's
hard.
true.
They say that it's a miracle, just for a movie to get made, and maybe it's even more of a miracle for that movie to be good, and then it's even more of a miracle for that movie to get distributed. It's just it's an uphill battle, I think, all the way. But certainly, I think perseverance is rewarded in this industry, I think, in all directions. Speaking of which, Kehlani, I understand you are originally from Toronto. Okay. And you have a history working on global sales. So currently you're in international sales at Blue Fox. Previously, you were doing global sales at Epic Pictures, overseeing films like Sea Fever, The Cellar, one of my favorites again, Extraordinary. I'm curious, do you see the distribution, the theatrical distribution process here in the United States, do you see it as meaningfully different than it is internationally?
Meaningfully different. I mean, it definitely like correlates. So as we were talking before, like it increases the value of the film if it does well here. That translates to whether that's like higher pay deals internationally for those local distributors, even if it doesn't do well theatrically for them, or a bigger studio deal. A lot of the times Lionsgate, so well, maybe not so much Lionsgate, but like Sony, Universal, if it reaches like a box office threshold in the US, you can, get a certain level of fee from those studios. So it correlates, but I guess there are still films that would do well theatrically internationally and not necessarily US. So for us, it's about like targeting those distributors, pitching them as, or pitching them the title as a theatrical film in their territory, because that's, something that could work for them, even if it wouldn't necessarily be theatrical in the US. And where we come in also, because the theatrical release would, raise the value of the film internationally, we can, because we have the worldwide rights, we can release the film theatrically in the US, maybe not on as wide a footprint as we would with a title that would be a slam dunk in the US, but we can like offer that to distributors. Like, hey, we are gonna do maybe not a full traditional theatrical window, but we are gonna do like a 3-week window, say, on 40 screens, and that, ups the value of the film in those markets where a theatrical release is important and a theatrical window is important. Yeah.
So if a film were to, if you had the same film potentially releasing, even if it was limited theatrical in the United States versus not releasing theatrically at all in the United States, even that limited release will raise the value internationally on the film.
For sure, and that window too is really important because we all know that piracy is a thing now. So a day and date release in the US impacts territories like LATAM, Russia, a lot of territories in Asia, where if it is, say, for example, a smaller genre film, where in those territories that is like a slam dunk theatrical release, they need that, that window to properly release it in theaters before it hits the digital market in the US and gets on all the pirate sites and impacts their theatrical sales or their ticket sales. So yes, it does increase, the value.
Got it. And quickly, have you always been on the international side, or where did you get your start?
In distribution, I have always been on the international side. Epic was my first experience doing a bit more on the US distribution. We didn't do so much theatrical, but Blue Fox is more, my experience on the theatrical side, and that's been an incredible learning experience. Prior to that, I did like development, production, like IP development and stuff like this.
Okay, interesting. And then Mike, I know you're one of the few people I know who has, I think, worked certainly on both sides. And when I say both sides, I mean on the studio or the distribution side, but also on the exhibition side, and currently kind of in between, where you are working certainly with virtually all of the studios, all of the distributors, but you're also partnering with exhibition in terms of running theatrical in-theater campaigns, et cetera. Where did you get your start?
So when I was 17, My dad came home. My uncle was the manager of the Egyptian in Hollywood, right down the street. It was owned by UA at the time. And he said, Jim needs an usher, you're going to work. So my first movie, it was a really, really big movie. This is why Jim needed help, my Uncle Jim. He said, we've got a movie. It stars John Travolta and Lily Tomlin. It's going to be huge. The movie was Moment by Moment. Don't ever watch it. It is awful. Like 12 people showed up. But ultimately, that was my start. And I worked at UA for 8 years. When I graduated college, I thought I was going to go out into the real world. Did that for a year, worked for a dental software company. Hated dental software, but I did learn a lot about computers and how technology worked, which was important. Came back, ended up working at Trimark Pictures. Well, actually, I worked for Mann Theaters in their home office, doing advertising and actually programming theaters with trailers, which is where I kind of got my start with this whole in-theater marketing thing. Then I worked for a company called Trimark Pictures. We had a little movie that absolutely went out and crushed it. It was my first taste of real success, and that was called Leprechaun with Jennifer Aniston, one of her worst roles ever.
Nice.
But it was a great experience because, like Rufus, we didn't know what we were doing. Like, we're distributing this movie. You'll appreciate this. One of our sales guys, Jim Wells, he was booking the theaters. And in theatrical distribution, I think it's important to realize, it's really hard. And the exhibitors remember, think of your local theater as a retail store, and if it's a 14-screen complex, they got 14 shelves. That's it. They got 14 shelves for their product, and that product better move. And so a lot of times when companies like ours were calling, it would be like, really? Again? Thank you. But with Leprechaun, Bernie Hines at the Pacific and Lakewood said, are you taking doubles? And Jim looked at him and said, what the hell is a double? And Bernie said, multiple prints. That was our first experience with multiple prints. So anyway, worked with Trimark. I ended up at Savoy, and then did some time at Technical. I've worked all over the place learning how it is. And then in 1996, I started at a company called Live Entertainment. And Live quickly was bought by Bain Capital. It became Artisan Entertainment. We had a little movie called The Blair Witch Project, which just celebrated its 25th anniversary.
Did.
And then in 2003, Lionsgate bought us. And from there, all the other stuff. And I've always been in theatrical distribution. And my specific role was in theater marketing and operations. Basically everything nobody else there wanted to do. And they would just keep throwing stuff at me. And digital cinema became part of mine. And I would do things like master license agreement, box office analysis, you name it, we did it. And it actually ended up being really good for me because I got to see how the whole thing works. And Rufus and I were talking about this before the panel started. The one thing to remember about theatrical distribution is ultimately it's a business. And going back to those exhibitors are looking to maximize their dollars. And at the same time, it's great that you have a Blair Witch Project that goes out and does $140 million or Longlegs that does 70. But if you can't keep track of where the money is and collect the money, you've missed the boat, So it's all fun getting the theaters and doing all that, but all the work really comes after the fact when you're trying to really clean everything up, so.
No, that's something that I'm constantly reminded of. Our former colleague together, David Spitz, would always say, like, the real work, yeah, sure, there's work, releasing the movie, but the real work and the most important work that we do is the collection afterwards.
Well, it's just important that everybody realizes, look, we're very lucky. We all work in the movie business. We're talking about movies all the time. I talk to some of my friends who have jobs in the real world, and I feel bad for them. But ultimately, it's still a business. And, we still have to keep track of, as Rufus was saying, you need to make sure that all the numbers pencil out. And, we were talking recently with an independent filmmaker. They'd made a film, and they hadn't really penciled the numbers. And when we broke it down for them, they were like, how are we going to make our money back? And the answer is exactly, things you should have thought of before you spent the money.
It's it is certainly tricky business. It's not often a very cheap business. It takes a certain amount of resources sometimes to get things off the ground and get them certainly to birth them out into the world via a theatrical release. You know, something I think that's interesting about this panel, and I know this, some version of this panel I think takes place most years at Holly Shorts, but it's interesting to me that this is a, you know, Holly Shorts, obviously, it's in the title. This is primarily a short film festival. And, you know, most short films do not make it, you know, into theaters or certainly do not have a very broad theatrical release or theatrical footprint. However, I'm sure there are some aspirations probably in this very room to, you know, some of these shorts are potentially parts, you know, a scene from a feature or a proof of concept, or there are aspirations to, you know, for the next project to be a feature. I'm sure in this room that there are just some questions about the process. If there's anything, even in the limited time that we share together today, if there's anything that we can do, any of us on the stage right now can do to kind of demystify that process, I'm actually going to open it up to questions from you right now.
You mentioned earlier penciling out the numbers and kind of getting that all figured out before you, I'm assuming, go into production.
Yes.
Can you clarify what penciling out the numbers kind of entails to justify a theatrical release?
Well, I mean, I think what you really need to do is you have to be realistic about what you're doing. And that is, okay, I'm going to be spending X to do my production. I'm going to need this much for P&A. You know, maybe somebody will pick it up and give you an MG and provide the P&A, and an MG is a minimum guarantee, and they'll provide the P&A. The good news today is that the threshold for a theatrical release from a cost standpoint has gone way down, meaning, you know, 15 years ago when you were on film or at the very onset of digital cinema, you know, a release, it was, you know, you were spending $1,000 a location to actually get the content to the theater. Well, now with digital cinema and everything like that, you know, it's under $100. So it's come way down on that part. You still have to worry about where the money's going to come from to advertise to people. You have to be realistic of, and again, I'm going to gross $10 million. Go out and look how many movies actually really go out and do that. But say you do gross $10 million, the rule of thumb, everybody is, well, the theaters keep half and the distributor keeps half. Well, not really, because in a movie that's going to be $10 million, it's probably going to be closer to this distributor keeping 40%. And the distributor is going to charge you a fee to be on top of it. So as you can see, that $10 million quickly is now $2 or $3 million that's actually coming back to your pocket. Then what's going to happen with your ancillaries? And what's going to happen with, you know, Kalani selling it to whoever? You got to pencil those numbers in. So at the end of the day, it's like, okay, it's going to cost me $4 million to do it, but if everything goes right, I'm getting $3 million back. That doesn't work, you know. And I think a lot of times, you know, what I've noticed, especially with young filmmakers or first-time filmmakers, you know, they see all these numbers in the trades and they think it's all just like a, you know, it's a giant ATM machine that just is outputting, and it doesn't work that way. I mean, Adam was mentioning Borderlands, for instance. You know, in all seriousness, there's a movie that is going to have a loss based on what it is, and it's going to be significant. And that is something that, you know, they didn't pencil it out that way, I can tell you that. And it doesn't always go. Now, there are times when it goes the other way. We worked on Godzilla -1 last year, and going into that, you know, Toho, I can tell you, you know, if they would have had a $5-10 million gross, they would have been really happy. Well, the movie ended up doing 57. So that'll be a complete windfall for them. It goes the other way. So I hope that.
I think, though, the strategy is partnering with a distributor early on. So someone who is in line with the content that you're looking to make, and they can advise on, you know, based on your budget, what's realistic in terms of a return or what you can do to up your return, whether that's adding a bit of cast, changing elements of your story. Yeah. So they can actually give you an idea of those numbers before you get it made, and then you're not stuck in the red. You at least set yourself up for success knowing those numbers.
A good distributor will help you find creative ways to compromise your material and turn it into something else. More.
Really.
There's an element of truth to that, sadly, but there's also, I think, certainly a lot of truth in the idea of finding the right partner. That if you are partnering with a distributor, you want someone who really understands and is passionate about your film, and that you know, the worst thing is kind of you know, jumping into bed with somebody who doesn't you know, who doesn't really get the film, or doesn't, you know, then you're kind of setting yourself up for a difficult ride. But I do think that you know, in terms of, and you guys can speak to this as well, but in terms of options right now, there, you know, despite all the doom and gloom that there's been for several years about theatrical this, theatrical that, there's a lot of different opportunities. There's no one-size-fits-all release approach, and you know, there's all kinds of different distributors. From, you know, you have your huge studios, and then you have you know, smaller specialty distributors and everything in between. So there is a lot of opportunity. It's almost like, you know, when you have a film or a project that you're hoping to make, it is a little bit of a dating process, trying to figure out, you know, who the right match is for you. Yes.
Like a smaller film? For a budget. For us, I would say that wouldn't be something that we would come on board with early on. If it was something that we saw at a festival that we really liked, then we would maybe approach filmmakers. Budget-wise, especially internationally, there's few genres that can get away with a budget that low. A lot of distributors now, like Amazon, for example, in Europe, they have a $5 million budget threshold. So those distributors in Europe cannot sell their pay one window to Amazon for anything less than $5 million, unless the box office is an insane amount. But not all of those titles are being released theatrically in those territories. So it's not saying that the film with a lower budget would not have great production value, because I know a lot of talented filmmakers that can do a lot with a little. But in terms of selling that to other people, to other distributors, especially internationally, it becomes a much more difficult sell. So let's say if you were pitching a film like that, I would go back and say, hey, if we love this concept, we love this script, if you can do it at, let's say, you know, $2 million, and the way you get to that, you know, to justify that $2 million would be to add this piece of cast or something like this, then that would become more appealing to us as a distributor and a sales agent. Again, not to say we wouldn't look at something like that if it came from a festival, but getting involved earlier would be more challenging for our model.
So the questioning, just so everyone could hear, is it possible when you're operating on a lower budget of maybe $100,000, $200,000, is it possible to kind of, I guess, bootstrap it a little bit? Like, I guess the examples that were given were Hundreds of Beavers, The People's Joker, which are two very independent films that have, you know, been able to attain a certain profile in the last year or two. Do you have a perspective on those specifically?
I do know producers who have self-released. I would say, I mean, this is in Canada, so not the US. I guess partnering with a someone who knows that landscape, whether that's a theatrical booker maybe, or yeah, I mean you could for sure.
It could be done. I mean, keep in mind that I think both of those examples that you gave, I was recently speaking with someone connected to hundreds of beavers, and I want to say that they spent the better part of a year kind of on the road actually touring that film around in person, you know, and that was part of the appeal, was that if you knew that if you were seeing it, it was kind of an experience. It wasn't just, I'm going to the movies, but I'm going to the movies. The filmmakers are going to be there. There's going to be a guy in a beaver suit running around. There's going to be, you know, and so they kind of really took it to, in terms of those grassroots, that grassroots approach, they really, you know, kind of put everything behind that. And I do think it worked. I think it got them a profile. So, I mean, to answer your question, you may have answered it yourself a little bit, that it is possible. I don't know that you could have done that with just any movie. I do think that it might have been more challenging. You know, People's Joker also had a certain amount of notoriety behind it, you know, due to, you know, just the lawsuits and the fact that for a minute that seemed like a movie that no one was actually ever going to see. And so, you know, those kind of controversies can kind of fuel things, certainly. I bet if you asked those filmmakers, though, I don't think, you know, on either of those films, they would probably not say that it was an easy process. You know, it was a big commitment, and it was a lot of time, and it may not have been lots and lots of dollars. They may have had limited financial resources, but in terms of time and energy and you know, that they had to put into it, it was, I'm sure, considerable.
And I guess ultimately it comes down to, do you think you could get those butts in the seats? Because that's what it comes down to, really. So, like, can you sell those tickets, or like, do you have a way to? And whether it's grassroots, or if you know how to access your audience directly, and you think that they would buy those tickets, then you could probably do it yourself.
Oh, here, we'll come back to you on this side. But.
Hi. I've produced a film that is a little bit in a privileged position. We have an angel investor who financed the whole film. We made the film. We premiered in Rotterdam. And so we shopped for a distributor. Being a unique film, we weren't super lucky. We had Metrograph that was interested, Utopia, those like kind of art house prestige distributors. Ultimately, when we got the news from Tribeca and South by that they were not gonna be there, they backed down. So we went to the same angel investor. We asked them if they were willing to back us up for theatrical and P&A. And he said yes. So now we're trying to understand if going to a distributor would make sense for us. We don't have experience self-distributing. We've talked to theatrical booking people, and so we are in that in-between stage, and we don't know if get a partner could be a benefit or not. If you have any advice on that.
This feels like a Mike question to me. If you, it sounds like what you're asking though is, should you try and do it yourself, or should you still look for a distribution partner?
We found the money for theatrical and P&A, so we're betting more if take a chance, and we don't really need to make them back hyper. So that's why I said it's super privileged. It's like, but we also don't want to play and ruin it.
Let me answer the question, because I did multiple movies that I brought the P&A, I released the movie. But first you need to figure out, do this one. A lot of people don't do that one. You have to do the test screening first. Do the test screening, get the audience opinion, and if it is 60-70% higher, and something audience says 70%, movie is too long, movies, whatever, cut that one. And if you have the money, it's easy to go to any distribution company. Depends on what kind of money you have, and you know, variety of distribution companies. If you are bringing P&A, everybody will very welcome to you. Then, because of you brought the money, you just not give it to them, let them do whatever they want. But you have to go see, my personal advice and experience is, take an experience movie, success movie, and do the case study. We did the exactly same thing when Sound of Freedom, $8 million movie, 6 years before the movie made, nobody wanted to release the movie. The movie collected $250 million. So you need to figure out what kind of movie you're making, and same level success story, that is your case study. So you bring that one, study, analysis. If somebody can do that success, why cannot I do that one? Then you go to the distribution, whatever the company you're picking, then you tell them how much. I know personally one of my friend, he did a $1 million movie. He brought $1 million on P&A. The opening weekend collection was $3 million, which is not bad at all.
Could you bring that P&A to one of the distributors that you've been previously talking to? Because I know for us, there'd be very few instances if a movie was released in the US theatrically or just released in general, where we would then come on board for rest of world. So you kind of don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, releasing yourself in the US and then not being able to exploit your remaining rights. So someone like Utopia, for example, who does US distribution and international sales, if you came to them and be like, hey, I know you were previously interested, I now have this P&A, would that change the deal for you, say? And then they can advise on a strategy like, hey, actually, that changes everything. This would be our rollout strategy for it, whether it's like, you know, taking it to AFM and then releasing it in Q1 or Q2 next year, that kind of thing. But you don't want to release it yourself and then not be able to exploit those remaining rights, because then you're leaving money on the table.
Another question over here.
Hi, I'm curious, with this very severe slowdown in creation on television, but also in film, do you think, and this is for all of you, do you think that the threshold that is in place for movies and their budgets will come down and there'll be more interest in indie projects again and kind of a renaissance there, especially considering studios like Marvel and Disney are not going to be making $500 billion movies for the next couple of years at least. So that fanfare and that anticipation of exorbitance is not necessarily there. So just curious on your thoughts of you think that indie movies will have a better chance and that threshold will go down?
Yes, is what the simple answer. You know, it's a very interesting ecosystem. So in my conversations with exhibition on a regular basis, the ongoing theme is they cannot survive on just the content coming from the 5 major studios or 6 major studios. They cannot. It just isn't. It isn't a viable thing for them, because as you saw what happened in the beginning of this year, for whatever reason, there is the product kind of dries up, they're in big trouble. Their margins are so thin to start with, they need a constant flow of product. However, it's a chicken and the egg a little bit. And it's like, while they want the independent product to be there, they're looking for independent product, as the panelists said, that has some theatrical component. And that theatrical component can be its long legs, that is just this, you know, indie darling that is creepy and, you know, catches a buzz. It can be a movie that has a star, like Substance that's coming out with Demi Moore that got a lot of buzz out of Venice. There's different, you know, formulas for that theatricality, but in your mind, you have to be able to say, there's a reason for this to, you know, there's a reason this movie is in the movie theater, and there's a reason somebody's going to spend $15 to come and see it. Like, as you put the project together, that has to be in the back of your mind. If the theatricality is there, there's going to be a path. There's always going to be room for those kind of movies. And I think you're starting to see the indie movies starting to have a little more life. You know, that has been the one kind of genre that has struggled to come back post-pandemic. But we're starting to see some blips that, you know, it's starting to pop back up.
And I just piggybacking on that, I do think that in recent years, what we're seeing, at least what I'm seeing, is that there have been two things reliably that have been working theatrically, and when I say theatrically, I kind of mean with a broad theatrical release. Obviously, the big, the Deadpools, the big IP-driven, franchises that. It feels like that audience isn't going away, even if there's rumblings about superhero fatigue, or things become fashionable and unfashionable, but that seems to consistently draw an audience. The other thing, though, the other type of film that's consistently bringing people in are lower budget genre movies. That I think because it's a theatrical experience to see a Longlegs or to see a Megan or something, it's just more fun with an audience.
Well, I mean, here's a great example. Smile, which went out and did 96 million last year. That was made to go on Paramount Plus. That was not made to go in theaters. Team Paramount looked at it and said, "Wow, we got something here." And they pushed it to go, and they've now launched a franchise, Smile 2, coming out this fall. So the point being, and I guess I'm talking on both sides of the spectrum, and that is, stay true to the content, obviously, but as you're thinking about, is it a theatrical release? Why is it a theatrical release? Why would, and it can't just be, well, because it's in a movie theater. It has to be, what is going to make someone come see this movie?
And you do see, even when it's not Smile, you see some distributors like IFC, for instance, has kind of carved out a very nice niche for themselves, kind of post-pandemic. I think they have maybe been the best at taking advantage of those lowered distribution costs that Mike referred to earlier, where we don't have the print costs, we don't have these, not to get too much in the weeds, but all the fees and other stuff that there used to be, even just a few years ago when you were doing a digital release. A lot of those fees have gone away, where the cost of just shipping out content to theaters is as low as it's ever been. And
but what and not to step on you for that, Adam, but it's really important to realize that's good news and bad news. So from a good news standpoint, the barrier to entry, as I said, is much lower. The bad news is the barrier to entry is much lower, and the marketplace has been flooded with a lot of movies that are just trying to fulfill a contractual commitment. If I get to 500 screens, it triggers my Hulu deal, and I go here. Put yourself now in the seat of the theater owner who's sitting there going, as I said, his margins are very thin, and he's sitting there getting pressure to play this movie that 12 people are going to show up to. That's not a good business for him. The ecosystem, the barrier entry is lower, but the movie has to be there.
And there is a lot of competition, but it's interesting when you look at your theater listings for just a multiplex theater. If you have 10 screens, or the more screens you have, if you have 20 screens, you're going to certainly see a lot of Deadpool in there. You're going to see a lot of Twisters, but you're also going to see a Late Night with the Devil, or a Skinamarink every now and then. You're going to see some stuff, some pretty off-the-wall stuff that really wouldn't have gotten that type of release or that type of profile.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed, and I look at the box office, every week, it's part of what I do. And when you get past those top 3 or 4 movies, it really is a smorgasbord that's been out there. A lot of Indian films, which is great. They've really found a niche for themselves, and there's a lot of gross coming out of there, but there's a lot of these independent films that you see, the IFC films, Neon coming in there. Bleecker was some. It's really kind of neat to see what's filling in, once you get past those top big tentpoles.
And I guess also just to provide my own, my own feeling on this is that I think within the industry, as in a lot of industries, I do think that audience tastes and, because ultimately it will be audience taste, and it's kind of the box office that will, that drives the decisions that distributors are making, the decisions that exhibitors are making. And I think those tastes are cyclical. And so I do think that if we are in a long period of everything being existing IP, everything being a franchise, I think people, do come around and they'll miss, I remember 10 years ago when we used to go see, comedies. in the theater, and we just haven't, like, so it's just, sometimes it just takes the right movie. I think we're seeing that with Blake Lively this weekend, that there's an underserved audience.
Well, this one is a great one. It reminds me of the Nicholas Sparks movies when they were in their heyday. Dear John, I went back and looked it up this morning, actually. 2010, it came out over Super Bowl weekend, did $30 million. No one saw that coming. And this movie is very much like that. It was a movie that all of a sudden, $7 million on Thursday, $24 million, Friday. It's going to be a 50 or close to it $1 million weekend. It's great for our business because everything runs in cycles. And I'm going to go on a little tangent here about theatrical, and that is, up until even through the beginning of June, the first couple of movies that came out in the summer didn't perform up to the level that not the studios were expecting, but the press was expecting. So it took a real hit from what's happened at theatrical, it's all falling apart. All you had to do was look at the release schedule and you knew that this was coming. But then when you looked at the second half of the summer, and there were 3 movies over the summer that looked like they were going to be really good. We had Inside Out, Deadpool, and Despicable Me 4. I'm talking about the big movies. That looked like it, and we were hoping that somehow it wouldn't be too bad when we're comparing to Barbie and Oppenheimer from last year, because that was $1 billion between the two of them. Fast forward now, do you realize this weekend is going to be about 35% better than the same weekend last year when Barbie and Oppenheimer were going? And that's because Deadpool overperformed. Twisters is overperforming. Longlegs is overperforming. It Ends With Us is overperforming. So guess what? People want to go to the movies. That's not the issue. It's all about the content. Give them the content and they will be there.
All right, I'm getting the wrap up. I think I saw one hand going up. If it's a short question, we can do it. It's a very small question, very short question. If you guys have a quick answer, I'll just say that I think networking is definitely a thing, and certainly I can't speak for everyone on the panel, but afterwards I'll be hanging out for a little bit, and if anyone else is hanging around, certainly you can ask some of those questions as well. Anything that you guys wanted to say?
I mean, I would say it's super basic, but it is actually super helpful if you have comparables in the marketplace to the film that you're looking to make. You can just use IMDb Pro or Sanando.com. It's also a really good one, and find out who distributed those movies in the U.S. or who was the international sales agent, and then you can approach those companies. Say you have something similar. Someone like Utopia, for example, has a very specific slate. So someone like that, it's easy to be like, hey, I think my film could be like this, this, and this on your slate. I know they did this at the box office. We have similar cast or budget level or what have you. But all that info is like on IMDb Pro, on Sanando, on boxoffice.com or Box Office Mojo, right? It's just, again, it's a little bit of research, but it's accessible to everybody. If you register for a film festival, I'm pretty sure you get a year's subscription to Sanando, and that's a great resource. I use it all the time.
Well, I'm being told to wrap it up. I do want to thank our panelists, Rufus, Kaylani, and Mike. And I want to thank you all for being here today. Also, thank you to Holly Shorts for having us, and pretty exciting. I think I started coming here in the 5th year. It was the 5th or 6th year of the festival, so to see that we're at 20 years is truly staggering. But anyway, thank you, everyone, and if you do have any other questions, I'll be hanging out for just a few minutes here, and you're welcome to come on up and shake a hand.
Thanks, everybody. If we could get you to